Alright, it's Henry again, and this is part 6 of my airbrush tutorial series. In fact, this is the last part, and today I'm going to be going over cleaning, disassembling, and reassembling your airbrush. Okay, so I'm done painting, and I'm just going to pour my leftover paint that I haven't used back into the paint bottle. That off. And I'm going to show you a technique called back flushing. Some people don't like to do it because there's a tendency to get paint inside the airbrush where paint isn't supposed to go. I have had that happen with my Mr. Hobby airbrush, but I haven't had it happen with either of my Iwata airbrushes, so I have never really had a problem with it with them. But anyway, this is how it's done. As you can see, even though you've poured out your paint, there's still some left down in there, of course. So I'm going to take the pipette, get some thinner, and fill up the airbrush. And there's two ways you can do it. You can either loosen the nozzle cap slightly and then press down and pull back, and what this is doing is it's blocking the nozzle, so the air, instead of coming out, it's coming up through the paint cup there, and that's causing those bubbles. And basically the idea behind it is the thinner and the bubbles are mixing around in there and basically cleaning up all of that excess paint that was left in the cup. You can also do it simply by covering the nozzle and pulling back on the trigger as well. Pretty much the same effect. So I'm going to dump this into the dirty thinner. Give that a wipe. As you can see, most of the paint is gone, not all of it. That's why I like to keep a cotton swab handy every time I do any sort of airbrushing at all. Might as well buy a large pack of these because you're going to be going through quite a few of them. And I usually like to do this twice. I find that doing it twice usually gets 99% of the paint out of there. You don't have to do it for very long, just a few seconds. Once again, just wiping out anything that might be left over. Looks pretty clean to me. And then spray out the excess thinner. Okay, so now we can cut off the spray booth, cut off the compressor, and disassemble the airbrush for a nice deep cleaning. First, undo the air hose. Alright, undo the back end. This part doesn't really come in contact with paint, so I don't ever really bother cleaning it. Undo the needle chuck. Remove the needle ever so carefully, one of the most delicate parts of the paintbrush. And then remove the needle chuck itself. Oops. Uh-oh, back end came off. Usually that just comes off in one piece. Just screw that back on there. The trigger will come out as well. Depending on what brand of airbrush you have, this might be one part, it might be two parts, might have a hinge on it. So, just different for each company. Remove the nozzle cap and the nozzle cap guard. Okay. Now, what I like to do is, this is just my cleaning procedure. You ask 10 different modelers how they clean their airbrush, you're probably going to get 10 different answers. This is just how I go about it. I load up some lacquer thinner in the pipette here. By the way, I mentioned this in an earlier video, but I feel like I should re-emphasize it again. I use the Mr. Color thinner for actually thinning my paints. but since it's really high quality and kind of expensive, I just use hardware store lacquer thinner for cleanup after I'm done painting. And what I do is I just put the pipette down here where the paint goes through the bottom of the paint cup, and actually I guess I ought to raise my camera up for this, and I just sort of squeeze that thinner out of the airbrush. It sprays out the nozzle, and I just do that right back into the thinner. This whole can is dirty thinner. This is just what I use for cleaning, but since lacquer paint separates so well, a lot better than enamel or acrylic, all of the paint particles just sink to the bottom and don't really get mixed in with the rest of the thinner. So everything up here in the top is relatively clean. As you can see, the thinner I'm pulling out is clear. So anyway, like I said, this is just for cleaning anyway. Alright, so I've done that. Bring it back down here. Then I'll usually go through it one last time with the cotton swab. Also want to clean up any paint that may have gotten on the outside of the cup along the rim there. And then also put a little bit of thinner on the end of the cotton swab and make sure to get this nozzle here. The nozzle doesn't get a whole lot of paint on it, but it will get a little bit. So just wiping that off, and make sure to be really careful, because this and the needle are the two most fragile parts of the airbrush. So be careful when handling those. Alright, next up, put a little more thinner on here. I'm going to clean the needle. Now the needle, most of this doesn't get exposed to paint. It's really only like the top quarter of the needle gets exposed to paint. So just wipe that down, and then with a paper towel, get whatever is left on there, and there we go. Let's see, the nozzle cap here, that will usually have quite a bit of paint on it. The longer you paint, the more paint is going to build up on this nozzle cap here, so make sure to wipe that down until all the paint is done. And then the little nozzle cap cover dealy here, that's also going to have quite a bit of paint in it. I usually just stick the cotton swab down in there, spin it around a few times, and that usually gets all of the paint. Okay, the trigger doesn't really ever get any paint on it unless you have some serious paint backup issues, which that probably would require repair rather than just cleaning. Anyway, now it's time for reassembly. So, I'm going to put the trigger in first. Put that in there. Then the needle chuck. Screw that guy in. Nozzle cap. Then carefully slide the needle down through the body of the airbrush, and you'll feel it stop. You'll know when it's all the way through. And then this guy on the end. And I usually just do the trigger a couple of times, make sure everything's in its correct spot, and there we go. And then at the end I usually take a clean paper towel and just shine everything up, wipe off all these dirty fingerprints, whatever little bit of thinner may be left on the airbrush. Just make it look like it came straight out of the box. And there we go. We have a nice shiny new airbrush ready for use all over again. Now, some people like to use those ultrasonic cleaners. I don't have one, but I've heard people swear by them and say that they do a fantastic job of cleaning their airbrushes and tools and even resin parts and things like that. So that is also something you may want to look into. I don't have a siphon-fed airbrush on me, but I do have a drawing of one. For these siphon-fed airbrushes, they're a little bit easier to clean because no paint gets into the airbrush body. So with these things, all you have to do is disconnect this bottle here and then just clean the paint out of the bottle and the little plastic tube, and you're pretty much done. So siphon-fed airbrushes are a bit easier to clean than gravity-fed internal mix models. Let's see, what was this? I was thinking one more thing I wanted to tell you. Usually, like this, what I just demonstrated for you is what I do at the end of the day after I'm completely done painting. When I'm in the middle of painting and I need to switch colors, I usually just dump the paint out, do the back flush like you saw me do a couple of times, clean it out with a cotton swab, and then switch to a new color. I don't disassemble my airbrush each time between colors. Maybe some of you do. I'm sure there are people out there who actually do that, but that's a little bit too much work for me. So I guess that about does it for this video, and that about does it for my airbrush tutorial. I've actually got a few more tutorials in mind, even though this is the end of the actual airbrushing tutorial. So you guys can look forward to more of those in the future. So with that, I'll see you guys next time.